Are you recording now?
Yep, you're recording.
Good evening, good evening. Thank you all for joining. Let me just ask off the top, Adam Beckerman from HPD,
Yes, I'm here. Hi.
Okay, Ted Weinstein hasn't come yet. Should I be waiting for him? I think I need to, right? Wait for Ted to come to the meeting?
Yeah, it'd be great to wait for Ted to come here. I mean, I'll be doing a majority of the presentation, but Ted will be answering questions.
Okay, so if you don't mind, I'm gonna wait for Ted to show up, okay? And we'll just go through with the meeting now, and when Ted shows up, then, we'll take you up, Adam, okay? Is that okay?
Okay, yeah, no problem.
Thank you. Okay, so welcome, everybody. Nice to see you. So let's do a roll call right now. So, Rosemary Ginty is here, Ingrid, Lee, right, and Ted is on as an EC. He has a extraordinary circumstances reprieve, and Jessica Sosa not here. So we have a quorum with Ingrid, Lee, and me, and Ted, I'm glad you're here. Good. Now, let's do the minutes, the December and January committee minutes. You remember last month we didn't have a quorum, so we're backed up a month. So December and January committee minutes. Does anybody have a problem if we vote them both together? No? Okay, can I have a motion to adopt the minutes from December and January?
I make a motion that we adopt January and December's minutes.
Seconded. Okay, any objection to adopting the minutes of the Housing Committee for December and January? Hearing none, they're adopted unanimously. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the HPD one. We will wait, as I said earlier, we'll wait for Ted Weinstein to join us before we go into that presentation. Okay, so I'll go on the chair's report then. Not much. I was thinking of next month and asked committee members to think about this, that we should maybe have our next committee meeting at like St. Stephen's Church. It wouldn't be hybrid, but at St. Stephen's, and maybe then we can invite the folks from the Marble Hill houses and maybe Fort Independence. As we are searching for budget items, it might be nice to hear from the residents there if they have any issues at all, but any budgetary requests or what have you. I just think one meeting out of the entire year we could get out of this office, right?
Mm-hmm.
No, just, so consider it. Okay.
That would be for March.
That would be March, yeah. So just, you know, I love doing a catch-up. There's so much going on in housing. You see that the mayor is being sued by Legal Aid and the city council for the bill that was passed. He vetoed, and it was overturned, to make more people eligible for the housing voucher program. So that's interesting. It's very unusual to see the mayor being sued by the city council, but we have it here. Also, I thought this was interesting. New York City, in settling a lawsuit, is no longer going to give 50% preference for a local population for affordable housing. So what the rule was, I didn't realize that, but,
Started out as 10% and now it's
50%. So if there's affordable housing in an area, 50% of the units are kind of set aside for the local population. There was a lawsuit about it, and the city just settled it. It's now going to be 20%. So it went from 50% to 20%. Significant, but I thought that was interesting, yeah. Everybody knows this. 70 employees of the New York City Housing Authority took millions of dollars in bribes as I understand it, there's even one lead.
Marble Hill.
Marble Hill has one such, super who has been indicted for that. It's a shame. I guess last, and this, in 2022, the, population that is poor in the city rose to 23%. 23% of the population in the city is now considered poor. That's up from 18% just the year before. That's a big jump in 1 year. And I only raise it because we got the census data from city planning that we kind of went over at the last meeting. It would be good to try and get that as updated as we can. Now, there's some new data, and we'll see. That's the only reason I raised this one. So that's a kind of it for me. Think about whether it's wise, I think it might be, to have a meeting. Maybe the next one, maybe March, maybe April, but have it, not here, have it someplace else, right?
The other thing that the city is doing, and they've started already, is converting office buildings into housing.
Yes.
Now, it's obviously mainly being done in Lower Manhattan where the problem is. But I'm wondering if they're considering down hello, Ted.
Hello, Ted, how are you? Welcome, a big welcome.
We just started, they didn't.
Hello.
We just were doing administrative stuff, and Adam, your colleague, is there.
And I think that to get your, we're
Oh,
gonna
so
start as
Winnie.
soon as you're ready, okay?
Why can't Winnie come in here in person? I haven't seen her in ages.
It comes to, it's so good, thank you so much for taking your time, really. It's, people have other things to do with their lives, so giving an evening to us is, we're very grateful for, thank you. Okay, so, can we start then, because I wanna guard your time jealously.
Don't worry, it's fine.
Okay, well, you're,
What you have to do?
okay, we're ready for
Okay,
you. We are.
Okay, so what we're gonna do, is, we asked, for certain kind of information. I hope we've given you what you asked for. And it's sort of it's a presentation similar to one that we've done, for a few other community boards. Specifically, about a year ago, we did one for Board 11, which was like what we call like our full presentation of focusing on new construction. I mean, a little bit about HPD in general, but focusing on, because that's what they asked for. They were getting a lot of new buildings being built in their area. They didn't really know how it works. They weren't sure what HPD's role was in that. And so we did a presentation. What we are doing for you, this evening is, there's a section of that. Basically, it's like a general about HPD, what we do, what's the city's housing crisis, some detail about that, and then about our programs for trying to address that, and some examples. What we're doing tonight for you is the part about the housing crisis, really. If you like that, and I think we sent, the Board 11 one, if you think it's something like that is worthwhile, we're happy to come back and we'll do that as well. So tonight is basically just giving you some data and and happy to answer questions. So what we're gonna do is, Adam is the one who put together a lot of the research, so he'll go through the slides and explain. I'll do, if necessary, some color commentary, I guess, and then we'll answer questions.
Thank you. And we're gonna follow what was given to, that this
Sure.
is, okay, thank you. Hi.
question, do people see the presentation in full screen or do they see my notes?
We see the notes.
You see the notes, okay, let me, sorry, give me 1 second. Here it is.
Giving your presentation.
These are my teammates.
Yes, I figured.
And Winnie, is my deputy director.
Hello. We actually didn't see the notes, Adam. We only saw your next slide.
What does it look like now? Do you just see a full screen?
No screen. You have to share it.
Oh, did I not share it? Sorry, give me. Sorry, checking something. Um,
So let them communicate. There you go.
That's good.
okay, do you see just the full screen now?
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Sorry about that. Everyone, I'm Adam Beckerman. I'm a senior planner on Ted's team over at HPD. So as Ted said, we want to, I know we've had some back and forth about getting you some data about your district in regards to affordable housing. So we'll go through some of that, and then we'll have time just to have a discussion and just talk about HPD and housing in general. So I want to start off by giving a bit of a kind of high level data, a snapshot of your district that will kind of, can kind of color some of the other, topics that are later in the presentation. So I want to start off by saying, the median household income for your district is around 67,000. This is about the similar median income for the city as a whole. I think that's around 70,000, and it's a bit higher than the Bronx household median income. Your district is 2/3 renter occupied, so 65% of all units in your district are rentals. You have a very diverse district. Almost 52% of your residents speak a language other than English at home, with Spanish being the most predominant language of that group. And I think this is interesting, 48% of housing units in your district were built between 1950 and 1980. And I think this is interesting because we talk about, pre-war a lot, so like before 1947, but a lot of the buildings in your district, almost half, were built kind of post this period in time, directly after kind of the baby boom era. So now I want to move on to talking about the kind of the affordable housing crisis in New York City. So what are our housing problems? We have several housing problems. One, housing costs are too high for most New Yorkers. As the population is growing faster than housing production, this leads to rising housing prices. Two, maintaining quality housing is expensive. So families with the lowest incomes often can't afford the types of rents that support the costs of maintenance. Three, there aren't enough available homes, so the lack of housing and high costs often leads to a growing shelter population. And fourth, limited housing and neighborhood choice are often a result of, discrimination and segregation in our neighborhoods that have persisted that really limit housing choices for many New Yorkers. So what is affordable housing? So from a policy perspective, it is determined that housing is considered affordable when a household spends no more than 30% of their income on rent. So following this rule of thumb, we can think, an income of 50,000, your rent could be around $1,250. So if your household spends more than 30% of your income on rent, they are considered rent burdened. And if a household spends over 50% of their income, they're considered severely rent burdened. So in the context of Community District 8, 54% of residents are rent burdened, and just under 30% are severely rent burdened. As you can see, this is around the similar numbers to New York City as a whole, and a little bit slightly less than the Bronx, but still a significant, proportion of the population is considered rent burdened in your district. So next, I want to talk about vacancy rates. So vacancy rates means what percentage of apartments are available at any given time. The rent regulations in New York City are based on there being a housing emergency, which means there's a vacancy rate of less than 5%. Currently, the New York City vacancy rate is 1.4%, which is a significant drop from the vacancy rate in 2021, which was 4.5%. When we break that down even further by borough, Bronx has a 0.82%, which is incredibly low, and just speaks to how difficult it is to find apartment in the borough of the Bronx. Then going even further, I want to highlight that there's discrepancies of the vacancy rate based off of rent prices. So apartments over 2,400 have a vacancy rate 3.4%, while apartments between 1,650 and 2,400 in rent, the vacancy rate is 0.78%. And I wanted to highlight this range here because that is considered the range where a household of three, making the median income in Community District 6 of 67,000. This is the rent range they can afford, and just showing that there's a very low supply of housing in this category. Next, I wanted to talk about maintaining quality housing. So the average cost to maintain an apartment in New York City ranges from $800 to $1,450 per month. And we can think when rents can't cover maintenance costs, government subsidy may be needed to fill the gap. And we can obviously see an older building often has higher maintenance costs. So that's a factor to consider. Next, as I mentioned, there just aren't enough available homes in the city. This chart is showing two things. In the orange, it's showing the population growth over time, and in blue, it's showing the different levels of housing production. As you can kind of see, housing production has kind of moved along, or housing production has kind of moved along with population growth. I want to point out the 50s and 60s in particular. As you can think that there's, post-war, high, the baby boom population, there was a significant increase in construction. Similarly, we see a large increase, post-1990s, but we see a lot less housing being produced during this time. Kind of break it down even further into, housing growth in Community District 8. Between 2010 and 2021, Community District 8 saw an increase in population by 8%, but only saw a 3.6% increase in housing units. This is compared to the Bronx as a whole, which saw housing production and population kind of like closer in sync. And lower compared to New York City as a whole. But I've been talking about mostly just overall housing units produced, but I want to focus now more on where affordable housing is being produced. So between 2014 and 2022, nearly 50,000 new affordable homes were constructed. An additional 135,000 units were reserved as affordable, but where these units were built were not evenly distributed over the city. We see a large concentration in the South Bronx and East New York / Brownsville. And this can really affect, housing and neighborhood options. As you can see, and you can see up here is in a lighter shade than, the South Bronx. Then kind of just parsing out the numbers a bit. This shows new affordable construction rentals and specifically. And you can see that CDZ 8 is, I think, the second lowest during this period between 2014 and 2024, in new rental apartments. So that's just kind of a quick overview of some of the data. And this could be a whole presentation on its own, but I just wanted to highlight some of the ways that HPD is addressing the housing crisis. One, we preserve existing affordable housing. So we give loans, tax incentives, other things like that, to repair and maintain existing housing. And in doing so, we require that your units are affordable. We create new affordable housing, similarly giving loans and tax incentives and other public resources to construct new affordable housing. We increase access to affordable housing. So we have things like Housing Connect, Housing Ambassador Program, and really trying to connect people with, with the resources we have to get affordable housing. And lastly, we protect tenants and homeowners. We do tenant education, eviction protection, rental assistance, all things, if you're in an affordable, unit, keep you there, and have you be able to stay in your neighborhood. So with that, thanks for letting us present, and we can take questions and have a discussion or anything you'd like to discuss.
Thanks, Adam. Yeah, just,
Just finish up.
yeah, the main points, I guess, come out of that is that there's those few slides that really do show the housing crisis. They show, the amount of rent burden that there is and extreme rent burden. It shows the vacancy rate. The vacancy report just came out like a week or so ago. I'm not sure everybody's familiar with that. The city contracts to have done what's called the Housing and Vacancy Survey, and it's using census information. Every 3 years it's done. And there's one, I saw one time, the printouts that go into the data, it's about 3 feet high. But the main purpose, the single main purpose of that Housing and Vacancy Survey is the vacancy rate for the city. And the reason is, just a little side description, is that, we have rent regulation in New York. We have rent control, which are the older buildings generally, and rent stabilization, which is the more current and common rent regulatory system. So anytime that you're going to tell somebody that they can't do something with their property, well, that's a taking. That's the legal term. It's a taking of their property in a way that they can't do what they want with it. They can't charge whatever they want. But because housing is such a necessity, what justifies this, having those kinds of laws, is if there's an emergency, if there's a citywide emergency. And for some reason, and there are a lot of things that have their numbers, it's 5% of this and 30% of that. I'm never quite sure if there's some secret commission someplace that sets these things. But it was decided at one point that 5% vacancy rate, that you need, in order to have a market, you need at least a 5% vacancy rate. And what that means is that if someone is looking, if I'm looking for an apartment, let's say, and there's a 10% vacancy rate, 15% vacancy rate, and I walk into a building and I look at an apartment, and the guy says to me, okay, I want $10,000. Well, then I can just say, well, the hell with you, and I can turn around and walk out. Because there's probably a lot of other apartments for me to look at if there's a vacancy rate of that amount. But if there's a vacancy rate of 1%, there's not a lot of choice. I can say to that particular guy, I'm not going to pay that much, but he'll say, okay, fine, I'll find somebody else who will. And so that's what the vacancy rate, that's why the vacancy rate is so important, because it establishes that there is a market, that there is an ability for people to go and have choices. And the fact that there's only, in the city now, 3-point-something%, and at the lower levels, the people who most need to have options to move, people who have lowest income, under 1%, there is no market really. And that's really the point. The other main point here is about the rent burden and severely rent burden. in a perfect world, if somebody wanted to build a building, an apartment building, so if they didn't have lots of money in their pocket, they can go to a bank, get a mortgage loan, and say, okay, I want to build a big building, I need $20 million, and that's how I'll build my building. I'll pay you like 5% interest. But that's not the reality of the world right now. Not many people can do that, just go into their pocket and do that. And not many people can then afford what they have to pay back to the bank. And that's why if they are going to be able to do that, they would need to have very high rents to be able to then have the amount of money, the cash flow to pay back to the bank. So that's where, for many decades now, the city has stepped in, and also the cities and certainly the state as well, and that is to try to provide some way, in various ways, affordable housing. Of course, it's obvious that, again, if the market, and again, with a 0-point-something vacancy rate, and half of the city being rent burdened, and a third of the city being severely rent burdened, then there's a real problem. There really is a crisis. That's why the city, decades ago, decided, okay, we have to, and going back even further than that, there was one chart here that shows by decades the amount of housing being built. And you'll see that in the 1920s, there was a tremendous amount built. What happened was there was tremendous influx of immigrants just before and just after World War I. And there was a great need, and that's when, a lot of the Bronx, for example, still wasn't built up yet. And so the decision was made, fortunately, by the government, city and state government, to somehow incentivize people to build housing. And they used it at that time was tax incentive programs. It wasn't so much subsidy, it was tax incentive programs. And so when we talk about tax incentive programs, whether it's J51 or 421A or any of these programs, the idea of using tax incentives goes back 100 years. Now, over the years, then different decades, different needs, different things available. But at some point, then the city itself decided, we're just going to put money into it. We're going to give people money to subsidize. And when we talk about subsidizing, we're not talking really about the people, the tenants. What we subsidize is the construction. When we talk about that, we funded a building, for example. We didn't pay the whole thing. So let's say that there is a project, I don't know, just make up $100 million to build the project. That $100 million isn't coming from the city. Some amount of it is coming from a bank. They have to have some money from a bank. But if all the money was from the bank, then we go back to that case I told before, where they would need to pay very high rents in order to be able to pay back. And so by having the city provide financing at very low cost, sometimes no cost at all, that at least makes it so that if you don't need as high rents, if you're getting more money from the bank, then you need rents that high. But if you only have this much from the bank, and then this much, let's say, from the city, then you can get by with rents like this, and with the tax incentives as well. So by putting all these pieces together, construction subsidy money, tax incentives, regulation of rents, that's how we can work. There just isn't enough. We probably 10 to 20,000 units each year of new construction are subsidized by HUD programs. The state has its own programs as well. And so we keep doing this and we keep encouraging. It's really funny in a way because back in like the 1980s or so, bank interest rates were very high. Then, to get money from the city was like tremendous. I mean, we have our most common preservation program at that time was 3% interest, and that's when banks were charging 20%. Now the bank rates aren't so high, and so what you see a lot of development going on, including in the Bronx, without HPD programs. I mean, we like to push out programs. I mean, my job is to help create affordable housing. And so every time I read that I see there's a building being planned at a particular location, then that I think is an area that isn't really the great market, but therefore it probably needs money from the city to be able to build something for rents that are not that high. I feel like I've lost. I said, damn, that could have been affordable housing, and that was not. Because what that person is going to do, And I keep saying, you know, I look at websites every day and I see, there's a posting that somebody has filed plans to build here at 149th Street and Exterior Street, or somebody is planning here to build a building on Washington Avenue and on 63rd Street, without us, without HPD programs. I say to myself, how are they doing that? And then I think about it, and I look and I see, there's one thing that I don't know if you're familiar with, the website YIMBY, which is Yes in My Backyard. They post every morning a number of these. They look at the building department filings and they post these things. Then I look and I see, oh, okay, the building's gonna be 30 units, and averaging 600 square feet. And I said, and what was there before, the two-family house. So the guy bought the property, tore down a two-family house, and now he's gonna build a 20-unit building, 30-unit building, but an average of 600 square feet. I say, no, I know what he's doing. They're just squeezing in many small units, studios, and maybe one-bedrooms as possible, and that's how they're doing it, because instead of doing, say, 10 units with some 2 and 3 bedrooms, they're doing 20 or 30 units, all small, studios and ones, and small ones too, like 500, 600 square feet. So that's what's happening right now in the housing market. More, at this point, even in the South Bronx, more buildings are being built now without our programs than with, and that's unfortunate, because even if they're using the 421A, which is expired anyway, and it's just about run out, so even if they're using that, so it's like 20 to 30% of the units have to be affordable. But that means the other 70, 80% of the units are not. They can be whatever they charge. And by the way, that's a program that we administer, 421A, and the marketing, the rent ups, have to go through our marketing unit. If you like, at some point tonight, I can talk about marketing as well. And so, you know, they'll see, those are the ads you see a lot of times in the papers, and you'll see, it'll list the number of units, but it only will show the units that are rent regulated, the ones that are the affordable units. Even they are being listed at, and we'll get into area median income, AMI, even they are at 130% AMI, which is a lot. That means that the ones that aren't regulated will be more. So that's one of the problems we're having with providing sufficient affordable housing, is that the market is working, but not the way that we would all want it to work, by providing more affordable housing. So we're constantly reviewing our programs. I'll just for a minute get into our programs. Like I said, if you'd like us to come back, we will with more detail about them. But they're all on our websites, that they can explain all our programs. We have one program that's basically for very low income people. We have another program that's for more of a mixed income, from low to moderate. We have another program that's for a little higher, that we don't use that one that much. We have another program that is for seniors, housing for seniors. We have another program for supportive housing, for people who are coming out of the shelters, and who need supportive services. We have another program called Open Door, which is home ownership, is to provide financing to do a building co-op. And so depending on the location and what we think the market is, and depending on the interest, of course, of the zone. I always say, and I try to catch myself, and I'm not successful, I guess, but when I say that we the city, we don't build anything. Provide financing, tax incentives, land when it's available. And the land, by the way, just to throw that in, you know, the city, and I'm sure you all know, back in the 1970s, 1980s, and 90s, there was terrible blight in many parts of the city, including the South Bronx. Fortunately, that amount just really touched your district. And so the city became the biggest property owner in the city. Of course, so many landlords, property owners, were not paying their real estate taxes. Urban renewal was much more heavily used to be able to actually take properties. And the main reason there was because you want to create assemblages. You know, you always say, like, if you have a block, and then the property, there is city-owned, private, city, private. So that's just a bunch of small sites. You want to create an assemblage, and that's what urban renewal does. It allows you to take those private properties and then you for public use, which would be, in this case, something like affordable housing. And so, you know, these are the programs that we have, and we use them depending on what's but again, we don't build anything. We provide, like I said, the land was, what I started to say before was, you know, if we have land, the city has land, and we want it to be used for housing, well, it wouldn't make much sense for us than to say to somebody, okay, we'll sell it to you for, you know, $50,000, $100,000, whatever. What good is that? Because at the same time, then we're going to give him a subsidized construction loan to build the building. So we don't, it's like taking money out of one pocket and putting it in the other. We want the money to go into the building. So when we do have city land that we can make available, like through a request for proposals, we then charging is $1 a tax lot. So if it's one tax lot, $1. If it's assemblage of 3 tax lots, $3. You know, because we have to charge something. But we don't want the money going, you know, into us from that. We want the money going into the building. All of these projects require the developer to have some equity in it, put money in themselves. And so I'm not a finance person, so I never try to go into explaining, you know, all the details of how that works. I mean, I know basically, but not enough. So we have these programs. We're constantly pushing them. Sometimes if I see that somebody is building a building without us, or planning to build a building without us, I think it's like a really good site for affordable housing. Sometimes I'll write to them and ask, you know, maybe you might be interested. You know, obviously our programs work. I mean, like I said, right now it's obvious that a lot of developers are not using our programs because I guess the bank rates are low enough to make it worth their while, and because we won't let them squeeze in, you know, tremendous numbers of units, you know, at tiny units at low amounts of square footage. And so they're doing this without us. Sometimes it's on the same block as we're doing financing a building. But, you know, I'll ask sometimes the developer, would you be interested in using one of our programs? But usually by that point, that I'm aware, you know, we don't get advance notice, of course. So all of a sudden I'll look at that YIMBY website and I'll see somebody's filed plans. If they've already filed plans, they're not going to want to first hold up. So, those are among the, I guess, the main things. Again, the main points here, I think, to make are that we do have a housing crisis, an affordable housing crisis. And a lot of the data here, I think, shows that. It shows, like I said, the rent burden, the vacancy rates. It's no secret that opposition is, we want it spread around. We want every community to do their part. That's why we have the one slide that shows in the last, like, 10 years, each Bronx Community Board, how much has been done. Now, there are also other reasons why some are lower than others. It's not surprising that some of the areas that have had the highest amount were the areas that had all that city-owned land.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's absolutely true. But, you know, there's also, you know, different attitudes towards having new developments built, new housing built. You know, we really want to be able to try to have everybody do their share. And so we do encourage that to happen. But again, I think, like I said, the main points were, like I said, that just to show, and I mean, I hope I got all, you know, the data that you were looking for. Like, yeah, we're happy to.
I think if we have some questions, I think that would be great too.
Fine.
I don't want to stop you.
No, well, I sometimes talk too much.
I have some simple questions. In the presentation, it states 65.3% of units are renter occupied. Do you also have the data as to which is under rent stabilization, rent control, and market rate for CBA?
No, and then let me explain a little more about the housing and vacancy survey, because I know one of the questions that you sent me was, can we break it down like that? What's come out at this point, 2 weeks ago, is sort of like an executive summary. It's more than just that, though, of the housing and vacancy survey. Because remember, it's the main point of it is to to get that vacancy rate, to justify regulation existing. And just to get to go on the site for a second on that, if there was ever, let's say, that the housing and vacancy survey was done, and they came back and said the vacancy rate was 8%, every landlord in the city would start screaming, door rent stabilization, would say.
Well, by law, at 5%, it blows up.
Go ahead.
Well, but what happens is, in itself, it's 5% in order to justify the emergency that legally justifies rent regulation. There's also, it gets broken down. Now, what was broken down, for example, was we were able to give you the Bronx number. So they were able to break it down by boroughs.
But Ted, you said, you were using the example 5% or 8%. But does it break it down as to which ones are under market rate? Because market rate would go,
Yeah, and then,
impact the RGB.
later in the year, the entire survey comes out, the entire report
And
comes
we'll
out.
have a breakdown.
And the breakdown,
Okay,
right.
that's good to know.
Because I actually asked somebody specifically, what about the idea of having it broken down by something like community districts? And they said, I don't know if you're familiar with PUMA districts. Yeah, PUMA. It's a different type of drawing of the districts that I think the federal government uses and some private institute use. We're actually in the Bronx, they're very similar to community districts. Not exactly the same, but if you look at the map of PUMA districts and the map of community districts, they're very similar. The one difference is there were 12 community districts in the Bronx, there were 10 PUMA districts. The way they do that is districts 1 and 2, community district 1 and 2 is one PUMA district, and community district 3 and 6 is one PUMA district. So if you were to look at the PUMA map at District 8, which I guess I've never done, I'm sure it's very similar to Community District 8. When these numbers come out later in the year, they'll be by PUMA district.
So I'd like the committee members just to ask, and I very much want the people who have joined us to have the ability to ask a question too, without keeping Ted here forever. I don't want to do that.
Can you hear me okay when I talk?
On mute.
Who do you want
I
to?
can hear you
Laura.
fine.
Yes, we can hear you. Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you.
Rosemary, can I just ask one more question? In terms of financing, does the low-income housing tax credit still exist?
Sure.
Oh, okay, so, but they're not doing any,
That's a federal program, there's nothing,
but it's managed by the state and third
Yeah, but
parties,
that's-
so you
no.
guys get involved.
no,
You
it's
don't get
definitely,
involved?
definitely,
Yeah, that's
definitely still exists.
Many of
Yeah,
our
yeah,
projects
it's
do
like
see
4%
LIHTC
to
funding.
9%.
Was
that Adam?
Adam saying something?
Many of our projects do seek LIHTC funding, in the end, to finance part of it, yes.
Either, LISC or enterprise, right? How, or does it go
Well,
through?
no, the low-income housing tax credits, the LIHTC, they have nothing to do really with enterprise or LISC. I mean, there's two types. There's one that's 4%, which is like it has a right, you fill out the application right, then you can get that. And then there's a 9% tax credit, which is a competitive process. In the spring, it's announced, developers apply, and then it's very competitive. A small number actually get it, because that's the allocation that we have. A lot of our projects, particularly the ones that are for like very low income,
You've been
That's
talking a
different.
lot, Ted, of new construction. No,
Yeah.
not that, new construction. What about preservation?
That's my question.
okay.
Ingrid, no,
Yeah, just, yeah, honestly, I'd rather just go jump, because I have that exact, I have more question with new construction, but do you want to split the conversation between?
you have, you said 10 to 20,000 units of new construction a year, I think you said that, and I'm interested in how many renovation? And the reason I believe renovation is so important, you talk about, the developers that are building and they're small units, right? We have a tremendous amount of housing built in the 20s, the 50s, the 60s. Those were substantial room sizes, substantial apartments. Keeping those up to date and equipped, I think, is an essential use of city money, because you are preserving quality housing. Those really are quality units. So, just to talk a bit about renovation and 10 to 20 new construction, how many units a year are done for renovation? That kind of,
Okay,
Good question.
the,
okay?
actually, for the new construction, it's closer to 10 than it is to 20. The combined is generally like over 20 something combined. Generally, there's more units that are what we call preservation than new construction. And we have programs for preservation, same idea.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's why I was mentioning that before, how during the 80s and 90s, so when the interest rates, bank rates were very high, you know, we had the program, an 8A loan program was one, participation loan program was another one, and those were the much more commonly used because new construction was still pretty dormant at that time. But like we had, in fact, my job at that time was to try to encourage that type of work in the Bronx. And we would try to encourage the owners of properties. Some of those are also more like code compliance programs.
Mm-hmm.
So that, for example, and just that code enforcement is one of the other big things that HPD does, totally different from construction. That's to enforce the city's housing maintenance code. And it's where you call up, 311, you complain you have no heat, or you haven't painted in 20 years or whatever it is. So a lot of times, what would happen is an owner, a property owner, would get violations that, let's say, he would have leaks in his apartments. And then the inspector would come and see the leaks and place a violation. But the leaks were being caused because he hadn't changed the roof in 30 years, or because the windows were the old wood windows. And so, or there was pointing needed on the bricks. So we would encourage the owners of properties to use our low-interest rehab loans to try to fix those things. Leaks from pipes, repiping. We did a tremendous amount of work in areas of the West Bronx and Northwest Bronx with those rehab loan programs. And they still exist.
Do you have a sense of numbers, or?
Over
Annual number?
10,000.
Over 10,000?
Still, I guess.
Okay.
Because what's in my mind is still combined is usually like a little over 20,000.
To
I
point
can
out,
get you more accurate numbers.
I don't have like the
Yeah.
exact preservation numbers for your district at this moment, but I think in one of the slides we said between 2014 and 2022, it was like 50,000 new construction, about 135,000 preservation. So it's kind of like, that's kind of the scale and difference that we see. But again, it depends on the district and the housing stock. Yeah.
You said what, 50,000 new construction? What was the Reno?
I think we cited that.
35,000 on
Yeah,
slide
that's
11. You can look in your pack as well.
Okay, or can we move to our, yes? We can always come back to us. I just
Yeah, I
I
agree.
want
Yeah,
other
I
people
agree.
included.
I agree. Mhm.
Okay, let me just see, how many people wanna ask, oh, the hands are going up, okay,
Belinda.
okay,
Belinda Hancock.
let me do, Belinda, go
Yeah,
ahead, your hand is
hi.
up, what's your question, dear?
I like to know how often is the AMI adjusted? Because you still have a lot of people who have yet to bounce back from the pandemic, either loss of jobs totally, or they've gone back into the work criteria, but they're not earning the type of money they were earning prior. And as far as affordable housing, I mean, you have by the standards, you either have a single person who doesn't make enough, or a two-family income household who makes too much. And so they're the one who, like the hardworking middle class, they're the one who always get, pardon my French, asked out of everything because they're too poor for rich and too rich for poor. Where's the fairness in that? And, do they take in consideration the employment market now, how much people are earning, what the status of a single family household or two income family household.
So I guess the question, what are the factors that go into deciding who can get an affordable housing unit? Does that?
Yeah, they, well, the real, I think the real point of the question is, if somebody's income has changed, does that hurt their chance of getting in? I mean, it might help their chance, because if they're lower income, then, but it has to be, the applications have to be based on current numbers. I mean, because you really can't start saying, well, this person had a good reason for going lower, but this person doesn't.
But what if their income, okay, what if their income hasn't been affected and they still make too much, according to what the AMI percentage is?
Yeah, okay, one of the things, and there's actually a few different things that play into this. Because you're asking about AMIs, you're asking about marketing, and these are different things, although they depend on each other. And then let me just, as quickly as I can, explain what happens. Any project that uses our financing, including if it's only the tax incentive, the 421A, has to have units that are some level of affordability, and be rent stabilized. So that's why, again, you'll see, let's say somebody builds a building, and they do it totally with private financing. They do use 421A. The 421A law requires that there be a certain number of units. Generally, it's like 20 to 30%, depending on which option they use. Those units have to be under a certain income level. They're regulated, and they're rent stabilized. The other units in that building aren't regulated, aren't stabilized, say whatever the market, whatever you can get. So that's the first part of it. When we do finance a building, so years ago it was different in that generally it was like one particular income level. And then people realized that that doesn't make sense. So for many, many years now, what has been typical is a range. So I would say, like in the Bronx, the typical range that we do as far as income eligibility is between 30% of the AMI to about 80% of the AMI. Sometimes it would go to 100% maybe it's a much stronger location. Also maybe that was a few years ago. The AMI's, the dollar amount for the last few years has gone up a lot, which is really unfortunate. So therefore, in any given building, you're going to have some people who are pretty low income, very low income, and you're going to have some people who are moderate, maybe even middle, and nobody knows the difference. You know, nobody has like a little thing on their door or anything like that. You know, I always joke, you know, the Scarlet A or anything, nothing like that. But because we believe strongly in income diversity within buildings, and so. You know, now some buildings may have, let's say it has that 30 to 80% range. Some buildings might be heavily weighted more toward the 30, the lower amount. Some other locations, if it's a stronger market, maybe more toward the 80 or the 90%. So it just varies. As far as marketing in general, you know, what happens is, you know, again, any project that uses our program has to go through our marketing division. If not for the entire building, at least for the percentage of units that are affordable. And so with the building, if it's new construction, and let's say that the building is about 2/3 finished, they have to advertise. We have a division, a marketing division, people, that's all they do is work on rent-ups. So they have to advertise in newspapers, they have to have signs up, they have the website, and people can then apply. Now, for many, many years, the process was manual. If you wanted to apply for one of these HPD finance buildings, so you know, you would write to that developer, they would send you an application, and you fill it out and send it back. Then you hear about another building that is also gonna be ready soon, and you do the same thing. You write to that developer, and you get an application, you fill it out, and you send it back. Then, some years ago, the whole system was changed. It was made digital, computerized, and it was like a whole new world. Of course, all you have to do now is go into the website, establish a profile, you know, who you are, where you live, how many people in your family, income level, things like that. Then you go to the screen that tells you which projects right now are accepting applications, and they're just listed. You can just then go click, 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 and that's all you have to do. And so a building, let's say a building of 100 units, which might have at some point gotten, I don't know, 1,000 applications, now it gets like 50,000 applications.
They had it on the news recently.
And
80,000 applicants.
And what that shows is, it shows two things. It shows how bad the crisis is, and so many people want or need housing, but it also shows how, how well the system works now, how easy it is, to do that.
And the website would be, if people in the community were interested in going on, how do you go? Where does one sign
It's
up?
Housing Connect.
Yeah, it's changed though, you guys changed the website though. I think there was a transfer of the Housing Connect website changed,
Well, they're constantly improving it,
But the name is how.
yeah, it's Housing Connect,
Housing Connect, yeah.
It's,
And to address what Melinda was talking about, the AMI issue, my understanding AMI is, the reason why ours is high is because it includes Westchester and Long Island. So it's kind of skews, you know, parts of like South Bronx and East Harlem and Brownsville. My understanding is you don't have to use AMI numbers if there's no federal dollars involved. So
I don't think that's true, Lee.
yeah, you could use the AMI for the local community district. There's no, like in East Harlem. I used to live there, that's
But
why.
there are programs that are based on AMI, different percentages are based on AMI.
Most programs are based on AMI.
Well, most every project,
Adam knows.
well, we were talking about LIHTC before. Almost every one of our projects at least uses the 4% LIHTC, and that's a federal government program. So that's based off of the HUD numbers.
But a more important point is, and I keep saying this, doesn't really matter. I mean, it's not just the geographic thing, in terms of that it's not just the city or not just the Bronx. Because the entire way it's calculated is not what people think it is. But if what we use for our eligibility, on the buildings that we finance, if we use the area median income, which is 100% of AMI.
It changes every year.
If we were to use that, that would be wrong. Of course, then you're saying it's only eligible for people who are at that level. And right now, 100% is high. But we don't. We have, like I said before, we have 30% to 80%. We have, so in any given building, let's say there's a building coming up. Let's say, making it up, where Stagg's building is on Riverdale Avenue.
Right.
Let's say he was using our program, which he wasn't. Let's say he was. There would be, end up being some units there probably at 30% of AMI, at 50 maybe, at 70, maybe 90, maybe 100.
25, I think.
Well, we don't, for the ones that we finance, we don't go over 120%, no. And so, you know, there are units, now it's more, rather than even the range, because when I say that we generally use 30 to 80, I mean, like, we generally use 30 to 80 on lots and lots of buildings. But some of them, half the units will be at 30 or 40, and then a small amount higher up, and then sometimes half the units will be at 80 to 100, and the lower ones are small amounts. So it still has the same range of 30 to 80, but with different distribution, different weighting. So, but again, the real point here is that, let's say you are someone whose income is at 30%. You could probably be eligible for almost any building that we do, because almost every building has some units at 30%. Now, there may be 49,000 other people who are eligible as well, but you know, you could be eligible that way. You know, I would tell you that outside of ineligible income. Our marketing people have told me that the next heaviest reason for people not being approved, they don't show up for the interviews. And the reason is, because when people go click, 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 that's what they're doing. And then that person who lives in Brooklyn all of a sudden gets a letter that they're being interviewed for a place in the Bronx, and they want to stay in Brooklyn, so they just don't bother to show up, and the reverse. But, you know, again, it's a tremendous demand out there for a variety of reasons, and there is something for almost everybody.
Is there anybody else on the screen? Then, go ahead.
Okay. I found this to be a very interesting chart. If I remember correctly, rent control started in about 46 and rent stabilization 73.
There was federal rent control during World War II.
Right.
And then the city rent control started, I believe, in, 73 or 75. Well, the federal was turned into the city, and then, I think, 61. And then rent stabilization was in 71.
71, okay. So, I'm really curious about this first one, you say in the 20s. I mean, it is, the 20s, and assuming that it basically died after the crash in 27, it's twice any other decade.
Again, I maybe this is before you, even I don't, there were a lot of tax incentive programs for the first time to encourage development, and there was a lot of vacant land. You know, you look at map even of the Bronx in 1920, and there's whole stretches of empty land.
So it really was the availability of land, you think?
Well,
Because I can't imagine the tax incentives were more than 421A and.
well,
and
whatever,
all that.
but that's why also, if you look at buildings, you know, what we call the pre-war buildings,
Mhm.
and you look at up in, well, when was it built? 1923, 1921,
Mhm, mhm.
1925. My mother's parents, with my mother, moved into a building in 1923, right after she was born,
Mhm.
near Parkchester, and had their lease from them,
Uh-huh.
and that was when the building was built.
Mhm.
That whole area now, which a lot of apartment buildings.
But there was, you're suggesting there was a substantial amount of land available back then, and not so much in recent decades.
Not nearly as much, right.
Not nearly as much.
Right.
Okay, okay. That helps me
That's
understand.
how the Mitchell-Lama program got it.
Okay, so, may I? Okay, Laura, and then Karen? Go ahead,
Hi.
Laura.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Thanks, Ted, for a great presentation. My question concerns the upcoming City of Yes for Housing Opportunity. My understanding from the scope of work is that developers will be eligible for a 20% bonus if they offer some affordable housing. If that's correct, how does that really affect the housing crisis for affordable units?
Hopefully it helps, because, and they still have to, last I heard, they still have to work out the exact numbers. But with the way that you described it, I think is basically correct, that, if somebody says that they will agree to have the building will be affordable units, they could get
Some affordable.
20%. Sorry?
My understanding is that it's some affordable units and the rest
Yeah,
would,
the extra units that they can do have to be affordable. I'm sorry, I misspoke.
right, no,
And
no.
then, and then so they can get another, yeah.
But I mean, wouldn't it be more attacking this crisis if they were building more affordable units and not just a pittance compared to the building?
We would love them to, but I think what this is probably gonna be most directed at are the developers who right now are not, except if they're using 421A, are not doing any affordable units at all.
All right, thank you.
No, the developer who is still gonna come to the city and respond to one of our RFPs, to try to get city land to build on, they're gonna do the same thing they've been doing, because they're willing to do affordable to begin with. That's the point, is that it's called Universal Affordability Program, I think.
Universal affordability preference.
Preference.
And
So,
is there a
yeah,
lot of
so that,
public land? Like, do you have a percentage in each borough of public land that is available for these units?
there's not much city-owned land left.
I-
You know,
that.
when I first started in my current position, which was a long, long time ago, particularly the South Bronx in particular, the South Central and the Southwest Bronx, there was tremendous amounts of undeveloped land, which again, unfortunately, has much become city-owned. There's not much city-owned land left. You know, they're looking, one of the things that the mayor announced in his State of the City message was more actively trying to use properties that have city, types of services. So for example, libraries. They've just opened up a building in Sunset Park in Brooklyn, which is residential over a new library. They're building one right now in Inwood, in Manhattan. And they have started working with us on one in the Bronx, over the Grand Concourse branch. It's behind what used to be Bronx Lebanon Hospital. And so what will happen then is they'll close down that branch, demolish that building, and then there'll be a new building built, which will have, like, let's say, 2 floors of library, and then the rest of it will be residential. And the idea is to use those types of city-owned properties as well. But there really isn't. We have going through ULERP now, 2 projects that are clusters of like scattered infill sites. You know, an 8-unit building will be built, a 20-unit building will be built. We don't have, for the most part, in the Bronx, you know, huge pieces of land that we can do, you know, big projects on. There's, I'll tell you, like, when you go down to Deegan, some of you may know this, when you go down to Deegan, you cross 138th Street, off to the right, there used to be an auto auction place, and then there's Padded Wagon, which is like a storage place. Well, the Padded Wagon is city-owned property. So there will be residential building developed on that property. Because the developer bought the old auto auction property, that was private, and then creating an assemblage, putting them together, they came to us and said, okay, if we can get the city-owned property, we're gonna build 500-something units of housing there. But that's unusual, to have that kind of building.
Can we go to Karen? Karen, your question? Good.
Yeah, hi, Ted.
Karen,
So I don't know if you saw the controller's report, and he has some stuff in there about vacant housing. What is he talking about? Because it looks like there's a lot of them vacant housing. Why is there housing that's vacant? Not
he's talking
used,
about vacant units or vacant land?
Units.
units.
We're talking about NYCHA, Ted.
The vacant units, there are unfortunately a very high number of vacant NYCHA units right now. And I'm with HPD, I can't speak for NYCHA.
Oh,
It's unfortunate.
I think, Karen, was the report, it was more general. It wasn't NYCHA vacancies, it was
No.
vacant rental units. Am I right?
Well,
Yeah.
there are some owners, property owners who are holding units back.
Yeah, but the report said, it came out today that only about 1% of, rent-stabilized units are being held back and warehoused, not the 5% that was being bandied about for the past year.
But, you know, obviously, we're not happy about any units
Right,
being
sure.
off the market.
it says 32,000 vacant available rental units. So you could say 1%, but that's a lot of units.
Well,
If you hover over the thing online, well, I'll send it to you, Ted.
So we talked earlier about the vacancy rate, and the vacancy rate You know, in citywide, there's only 3-point-something%.
Mhm.
Those are units that are vacant and available. That's a very small number. In the Bronx, it's under 1%. So, you know, there may be, you know, with any number of vacant units right now is too much.
And he has a vacancy rate in chart 8 of 7.4%. It says 2023.
Well, I don't know what his formulas are.
And did this just, Karen, did this just come out, this
Yeah,
controller's report?
This just
Okay.
came out.
So
It's
maybe you
dated,
haven't had a chance to read it, so
it's
you-
dated, February 13th, 2024.
Mm-hmm. Adam,
Okay,
you want to
I
say
mean, I
something?
can, yeah, I can't speak to, you know, what you're pulling from, but we spoke a lot about the housing vacancy survey, which, you know, as we said, we'll have like even more data coming out, but I can send around the document, that the fact sheet. It's actually, there's actually a lot of really interesting information in it. It even has like, you know, you were asking before, we don't have it based off of Community District 8 right now, but there is like charts in there that shows like how many units are rent stabilized versus public housing versus market rentals. So there's a lot of, that's the information that we're pulling from. I can't, yeah, so I can send that around after this call.
So nobody saw the controller's report? Is that what you're just kind of
Well, if it
saying?
just came out today, no. I'm sure that the people who work with it have seen
It's good. Karen, thank you for raising it. I mean, that number is significant, and as we go through City of Yes Housing, that number of vacant units needs to be explained somehow or considered or what have you. So, you'll take a look at that report, yes.
Okay. Okay.
Good, okay. Go ahead.
I think you and I talked about this once, the Cross Bronx Expressway, sort of like the Trans-Manhattan Expressway, which is the Cross Bronx in Manhattan with 5 monstrous apartment buildings. They did the same thing along the Cross Bronx. They probably put in tens, if not hundreds of thousands of apartment buildings by capping over the Cross Bronx. And you've got ventilation issues and all that sort of stuff. But I mean, that could be a good source. Over by the Jerome Park Reservoir,
Well, let me just mention something.
Yes,
about this. There was a federal grant that the city got, looking into the idea of taking over the Cross Bronx Expressway, at least at certain points.
Right.
And there have been some community, I'm not involved in it, but there have been at different times some community meetings to get input from the people in the community.
Yeah.
My understanding is that for the most part, people in the communities don't want housing built on it, they want parks and things like that. So,
Schools, parks,
Yeah, no, I've been to them, and they want both.
yeah,
And I've always said
I mean,
both.
we're always happy to do housing, you know, that's.
Yeah.
I'm just saying
Yep.
that, it's gonna be a while yet, but it's something that, anything that creates more housing opportunity is fine.
Well, the other one thing is, like at Jerome Park Reservoir, the BC&D, train yard, is not really different from Hudson Yard. And there's, you know, the A train yard in Upper Manhattan, and there's several train yards.
Yes, train yards are definitely, again, a possible opportunity, they're expensive.
Very expensive.
You remember that
The steel work to build
the previous borough,
platform.
You're creating land.
the previous borough president did a report on that
Rubin,
at one
yeah.
point. I mean, absolutely, it's just, it's expensive.
So, anybody else from our great, Julie?
Hi,
You
it's,
raised or you-
it's
Okay.
not a
Oh,
question.
thank you, sorry.
It's not a question, but I just wanted to thank Mr. Weinstein for always being so informative to the board. And I appreciate you and your staff coming and giving a very informative session. Thank you.
Pleasure, thank you.
Excellent. And would that be okay if we wind this up and say thank you, Ted, for spending time with us, really. I'm gonna say it again, you have other things to do with your life, and you came here to do this. It's very much appreciated. And Adam, thank you very much for helping us out. Thank you.
Thanks for having us, yeah.
And I
I'm gonna
do,
walk home now.
and I see Winifred HPD also, thank you for spending time with us.
You will.
And
Pleasure.
if there are more questions, I'm sure we can send them along to you. You'll help us out, and,
There was something that Artie sent, about averaging.
yes, okay, when city planning came to make their presentation on City of Yes Housing, early on, it was the very first presentation we got, a person from city planning said the following: so as an example, 80% of AMI, you can wind up with this dollar amount or blah, 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 under the universal affordability preference. But, says this person, we can do a lot better than using a percentage of AMI formula. We can do a lot better. It's called income averaging in the building. And we are now working with HPD to come up with a new way to do rents. Income averaging in a
They
building.
didn't tell you, Ted, did they?
I'm not sure that, I'm sure there are things that I don't know. But there may be a misunderstanding on that. The income averaging, it doesn't change the use of AMIs or percentages of AMIs, which is what I said is what we do. But let's say that you have to have, and the last I've heard, they've not decided what level. So when they say you have to do affordable housing, what does that mean? What's the definition of affordable housing? Unless I've heard that wasn't decided yet. But let's say, for example, let's say it's 80% of the AMI. Then does that mean that every unit has to be under 80, or can it be an average that's under 80? That you have some units in that building maybe at 70 and some at 90. But as long as the average, you can do that now and be eligible for the tax credits. For many years, you had to use the federal tax credits. You had to have every unit under 80%. And Congress, one of the few nice things they've done recently, passed allowing averaging so that you can do what I just described. You can have some units over 80 as long as it averages under the 80. So that's what I think she might be thinking about.
Okay.
So it's not really a change in the AMI system. It's a change in how you use it.
Well, city planning is working with HPD on this concept.
Well, this whole thing about the City of Yes,
Yes,
I mean, it's a city planning initiative.
yes.
But obviously, the part that's for housing, involves us. There's a series of, like, seminars, webinars, I guess.
Mhm.
There's one tomorrow night.
Right,
Did you know about that?
Julie sent the information to us, yes.
Good.
Okay.
Yeah, I said it on the first one, and I thought it was helpful. The only reason is that I saw on your agenda, you had something about a housing guide. We have, HPD produces something called ABCs of Housing, and just came out with a new, I haven't actually seen it yet, but there's one for owners and one for tenants. So this might be worth your getting.
Thank you. Can we take that sheet
Sure.
or not? You're a doll. Excellent. One more thing I don't have to look up on the computer or ask Artie to look up.
An amazing resource, Ted.
Thank you. Ted, thank you very much. Very appreciated. Okay, very much appreciated. Okay, and Adam and Winifred, thank you. Okay, you're free.
I'm gonna go.
You are free.
You're relief.
Thank you.
You are free.
Good to
It's
see you all.
Thank you.
good to see
Say hello to
you.
Robin.
I will, thank you.
You're more than welcome.
No, I'm saying, no, I really just wanted, frankly, I came because I wanted to hear Ted.
Okay, there you go. Not us.
No, huh?
You taking him home?
Okay, thank you. Where do you, I know you live in the area.
I'm in Cambridge and I drove.
Oh, okay, well, I biked, so, we're on, walking distance.
It's not a bicycle built for two, so
No,
he'll find
no.
his own way home. Okay, where are we on the agenda? Did we,
All business now.
old
The
business?
housing guide now.
Okay, it's just, because now we get in the I call this the boring part of the meeting. Is there anybody up there that wants to raise an issue with us or ask a question or anything? It's so good of you all to, come.
Night. Good night.
Yeah,
I'll get that.
Okay, we're okay? Good, thank you. Okay, so, updating the housing guide, okay. My piece is in, Lee's piece is in, did that get Xerox? Did it? Did you, okay. Before we leave, you'll make copies for all of us, and Jessica, no.
I owe you this week. Right.
And Ted? Yeah. Ted, can you unmute yourself? Where is, what's the status of, your pages for the, housing guide?
She has 26 through 29.
Page 26 to 29 was your assignment. Actually, it was only 3 or 4 pages, yes.
Can
you hear us? Ted, can you hear us?
Yes, I hear you.
Okay, so, we're going over the pieces that we have to do. Mine is done, Lee's handed hers in, Ingrid, is gonna hand hers in, Jessica will be doing hers shortly. So what's the status of, your section of the housing guide, was the question?
Okay, I need to look at because I didn't get an email about the portion of the housing handbook, but portion of the book.
I sent you an email and, we
When?
sent all the information, okay?
Because I got something from Andy. Let me just double check. Let me see something.
I think Artie was asking if you were attending. I don't think he sent you the, assignment for the housing guide.
Because I'm looking here through my emails.
Yes,
And
I
how-
sent this before, what was, we're in January, so January was due, sometime in December, I sent this.
In December. Okay, that's different. Oh, boy.
At this point, I'm guessing. Okay, it was some time
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah, if it was back in December,
Just at a meeting, Ted, that you are not at, which is why.
yeah,
you're
if it was
not
back in
the last 4
if it was
pages.
back in December, I had a situation in the family, so I wasn't even in New York around that time. So more than
Okay,
likely,
but,
back in December.
but Ted, it's been emailed to you, so can you,
Seems like it's a long time, but we had the holidays, so.
can you
Yeah, and I'm-
search your emails? It was, I mean,
I'm
I'll
looking-
search mine and send it to you again, okay?
I'm going back here as far as, let's see,
Let them know what page it is.
December,
Excited.
Go ahead.
Ted, all you have
Yes.
to do is page 26, which is complaint form, then 27, which is the glossary, 28,
Okay.
which is Bronx Community District 8 map, and then 29, which is your opinion count. Those are the only 4 things that I get from the title. They're not.
It is
they're-
the list of elected officials
Yeah,
as part of that,
it's not that much information that you need to update, and it may not need updating, which is why you just need.
It will
to-
need updating because elected officials have all
Not all-
changed.
Yes,
Not all
yes.
the things need to be updated.
Ted, how do you feel now about approaching this? Cause, you know, Rosemary, right, she mentioned she didn't want us to take too long with just getting the information as accurate as possible to date. So you just have like the last sections of the housing guide. First question is, do you have a copy of the housing guide?
no.
But does he
I'm looking,
No, he
I'm
hasn't.
looking back. I'm going as back as far as the 4th of December. And I don't see anything here. Who is it coming from?
Okay, so
You need a copy of the housing guide, it's on the CBH site, and then there are a
No, you
few,
have to give him the whole thing, you can just give him the pages that he needs.
Artie, would you mind doing that to make sure Ted got what he needs? All right,
Just give him the.
Okay, Artie is going to email you the pages that you have to look at and update, okay, Ted?
Okay, and I'll work on that tonight.
thank you. That's it, 'cause we want this done before the next meeting essentially, so then we can talk about other things about it, you know, like, you know, like, whatever, making it more user-friendly or whatever that is.
Yeah,
But we just wanna make sure the information. Rosemary don't wanna do it, but I think it's worth it.
Yeah,
Okay,
because the only thing I
okay,
have
can
here
it-
is from Ardmir Mauziu.
You have the page number? Okay.
Yeah, and that's,
Okay,
everything else has
Ted,
come
Artie,
Ted, don't worry about the past. Artie's gonna send you what you need to do, and then that's it. We just need it ASAP, so we can
Got
get
it.
over the hump of making sure that that document is accurate to date.
got it.
okay, Ted. Now, it has the elected officials on it, right?
It doesn't have to change anything, because it's on that.
It's real simple, yeah, it's, yeah.
And this is, 29 is our opinion count.
And where are the elected officials? I know I gave him that, okay? Then you had the wrong pages, I'm telling you, he got the elected officials.
They changed the pages.
It doesn't
Yes.
have it.
Okay.
That's the
Did-
old one. The new
everyone-
one has a different-
I'll do it, I have the original thing that we did that night,
Oh, the
okay?
elected officials
Can we, you wanna Xerox that from that night?
is 24. That's in 25. Not in 24.
This is the one you wrote down.
Yeah, the breakdown. Let's just get that scanned in and emailed, that's it. So then we can get over it by, by next week, we can just get it up to date.
23 to the end.
No, you have
23.
the, elected.
Okay,
So
but
then do I, so then I have it.
No, Jessica has the elected officials.
Stop! Every time somebody Xeroxes this, the pages change. I don't know why, but they do. This is the one that we use, so 23 on. 23 on, okay? It starts with government, Bronx Housing Court, then all the elected officials.
That's Jessica.
It isn't.
I have 17-23.
Yeah, well, that's how I have it marked, so I don't know.
Okay, I have 17 through 23. Ted, you have 23 through 27, is that what it is?
26
You're
through
taking it from,
29.
everybody stop. This is ridiculous, okay? We're gonna use this as the document, 23 on, you're gonna send that to Ted, okay?
And then you still have to do 26.
And here's
Whatever Rosemary needs.
here's the thing. This is the document this is the document, you put down, all the pages, this is it. I don't care what everybody has Xerox, this is the document. And these tell you what pages you have to do. Next, once this is done, and I asked this at the beginning before we started, how are we gonna verify each other's work? What is the best way to do that? How was it done last time?
Julie, do you remember how it was done last time, because you were on the board? I was not.
We each had our sections, and the sections that we had, we called and we emailed every information on each page. We verify, we self-verify. You have,
So it was all self-certified?
Yes.
yes, well, we would call the number, make sure that all the information that we had was still correct. And we would also email, any email that's in the guide, we would email to make sure that we had the correct email and that it was still in existence.
Understood. So as and I hope everybody is doing that, every number that is on your pages has to be, I'll call it field tested. That's what I did on mine too.
That's what has to happen.
That's what has to, every phone number gets called,
I agree.
every email address, you go to the email address, 'cause it turns up, no more, it's.
I agree.
That's why I have a lot of new numbers. 'cause
Okay,
the numbers are
exactly.
Current, and the same thing with emails, a lot of.
And
emails.
addresses,
Mhm.
you go online, the addresses, they have changed, so that's the way it was done, Julie, and it
Yes.
was not, I'm looking at your beautiful face on the screen.
Sorry.
Is that and that was it, and so it was self-certified, understanding everybody called every number, checked every address, and checked every, website.
Email. Yes, and it's very time consuming, and it will be even more so now since after COVID, everyone has moved or they're not in existence. It's very time
That's
consuming.
right. It is, but each of us only have 7 pages. okay? That's it. 7 pages. It's doable. Okay, everybody understood, okay, so we will do that, and,
Send it over to
okay, we're gonna Xerox yours before we leave? Okay, now, last but not least, is, budget priorities. Okay, it was just Lee and I last time, so, we really couldn't, delve deeply into, we were here by ourselves, right? Budget, priorities. I can tell you what we did talk about, though. I really don't want to see a budget priority on a list unless there's a story behind it, that we know that it's needed, and why is it needed? What is the fact pattern behind that? And what we talked about was, we know, for instance, there is a crying need for more DOB, inspectors. We just had that building fall, the whole corner fall apart. There was a Department of Buildings, what do you call it? They came here and people from the community came on. It's inspections. So we can justify putting that on a list. We have the information, we have the evidence that there is a need for that. So that's kind of what I'm looking for. And beyond that, I don't have anything. So how do you guys want to address, you said HPD inspectors too.
Right, and I just realized, it was here, we should have asked him, what's the separation of power between DOB inspectors and HPD inspectors? Forgot to ask him that.
He actually mentioned that inspectors go out to, no heat, the heat isn't good, or there's a leak, yeah, that's right.
So maintenance versus violations,
Yeah.
like structural violations,
I think it probably is the severity of something. Somebody says there's a leak in that's not necessarily a building,
It would
that's,
start with HPD and maybe get elevated into DOB.
depending on what the cause of it is. If the ceiling is about to fall in, right?
The most recent fire they had in Harlem was, it turned out that it was an e-bike, lithium. The reason it spread throughout the building was the door didn't close.
Oh, that's terrible, I know.
Which automatically, all your front doors, the building, the doors to your apartment, are shut if you don't hold on to the doorknob.
If you let it go, your door should shut automatically.
Right, and apparently this apartment where the fire.
Never
did
did,
not.
so then
So
it spread all over the floor,
So
everywhere.
who would have been responsible for that?
The landlord is
No.
responsible.
Who would have been responsible to complain? Would it have been to DOB or to HPD? See, that's my question.
311. I don't know the answer. It's a good question, I don't know the answer.
Yeah. I would think, like, even in my building, like, 'cause they actually did a survey and asked, like, everybody to check whether or not the door does close on its
The
own.
fire escape door too, the hallway.
Yes,
the
Hallway door.
But it seemed like it was the property management, the property manager
They're
is,
supposed to maintain it.
right, but then, exactly, so
And if
they
they
have
don't
to fix,
maintain, if they
right.
don't maintain it, and the tenant wants to complain, what agency do they complain? You said 311, and then
It could
they
be,
would probably-
my
probably
assumption is
send it to the
HPD. It's not structural, it's,
It's not, right.
Once it has to close, it doesn't, my guess would be HPD. It seems
Or it
like
might
the
even
kind.
be the
Fire department, yeah.
That's another-
Mhm.
Yeah, or the fire department, okay.
That's
Mhm.
an interesting question.
After there was, the tragic fire on, Southern Boulevard, Twin Parks or something, remember that one, where so many, it was heartbreaking how many people, that was the doors didn't close, the doors didn't close. Well, in my building, 450 units, they said, now, everybody started checking after those tragic deaths. I've lived in my apartment 35 years, my door has never closed by itself, ever, ever.
Until now, did they fix it?
When I said, they said report, if it doesn't, then report it. They came up and they jigger a thing, and now it closed. It slammed on my hand, yeah, okay, yes. I said, so now it's.
It's definitely closing.
I almost broke it.
Finger.
Gotcha. Okay, so HPD, we can write to Ted and ask him. But we have to come up with a list. How you guys wanna do this?
A list on what our priorities, if we understand, for housing.
Capital and expense.
Well, I think this entire presentation was that we don't have enough of it, right?
What capital budget requests do we want to put in, if any? What expense budget requests do we want to put in, if any? This is CBA's request for last year.
Yeah, maybe.
And wait a minute, folks, I did every single housing request. I spent 10 hours doing it and gave it to all of you. So,
I remember us going over it in an executive meeting where we talked about capital expenses, but it was very specific, like, you know, boiler, upgrades and stuff like that, right? I remember that.
It usually brings up all the two NYCHA building developments and what they need. Right? Get them in the previous.
I would say energy efficiency, like, we can put that on the list, like, I don't think.
how do we know it's needed?
How do we know it's needed?
Yes. So for instance, there are a number of things in here, like from NYCHA, like do the laundry room. Well, has it been done? Why would we just put it on the list? Because it was on before? We need to examine, has it been done? Is it still necessary?
Well, oh wait, Julie wants to say something?
Hi,
Wait,
I just want to say in the past, with NYCHA, we've invited their representatives to come to the meeting, and since you're gonna have it St. Stephen's, it's perfect because they can come and they can let us know. You can speak with them beforehand, let them know what was on the list in the past and has it been done and where are they in the process, and then they can also tell you at the meeting what's needed within the two NYCHA buildings.
yes, I said, you were on at the beginning, I said, I think I want to do, you should consider, I think we should do our next meeting at St. Stephen's, I really do. And, do exactly that, invite, Marble Hill and Fort Independence, and that will be one of the items on the agenda, tell us what, I also want to hear, if they have other issues, but what, exactly, exactly.
There are definitely other issues. There are definitely other issues at Marble Hill. There are several things that we had put on the agenda in the past that still haven't been addressed, especially when it comes down to lack of maintenance workers. We still have to come out, and not just one building, but in most buildings on both sides of Broadway, dealing with the garbage. Garbage piled up almost in front of every building in Marble Hill. That's unacceptable. You have to step over boxes and things of that nature. Broken doors. There's still an issue.
Okay, that's an operational issue. It's not a, right? Yeah, that's an operational issue.
Well, it's more of a budget issue because when you go to them, they're going to tell you it's a staffing shortfall. So that means you need money to pay these people to clean the property. So it's not just operational where they're being assigned incorrectly or there's a logistical issue. The problem is they're going to tell you they don't have the money. So that's a problem.
Okay.
When tenants.
He just said it's because the super took it all.
Well, the tenants.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah. It's an issue because you have tenants that pretty much are housing burden because they pay so much as far as rent is concerned. Because now when it comes down to housing certification, they're not just asking you for areas of income. Now they want to know your life insurance policies, and they add that as part of your income verification. So you're operating almost at a deficit whenever you're being charged so much money to live in these places, but then there's services that are lacking. So that needs to be addressed. During my tenure with the housing committee, you know, I spoke to these people directly, and I challenged them directly because not only am I part of the community board, but I live here. So you can't tell me one thing and do another because I live here. I see what's not being done. You know, I still see where we had to deal with water overflow in a certain part of the buildings. I still see the trash. I still see the scaffoldings up and no work being done. I had to walk up 15 flights because during a rainstorm, they turned off the elevators. So I had to walk up 15 floors with 2 bags of groceries, and I'm on crutches. So these things need to be addressed, and they're not being addressed. You know, there has to be some type of something being done, and I'm sure if it's happening here at Marble Hill, it's happening at Fort Independence. It's happening all over the city.
If it's not exactly, I'm sure it's similar, Ted. I'm sure it is.
Yeah.
So we're talking about having next month's meeting at St. Stephen's Church, or maybe in, you know, Marble Hill has that community room. Do you remember that, Lee? That Marble Hill has a small community room?
I don't remember, I know,
Okay.
going to one of the,
It's still there, but you would have to see if it's available because last time I was there,
Understood.
portions of the community center were under construction. So
Okay.
and that's been ongoing for several years now.
Okay. I only mentioned because it might be more convenient for the residents, but St. Stephen's Church is pretty, it's easy too. It's very, very close, so we'll stick with St. Stephen's Church. And we'll make sure we invite, people from Marble Hill and Fort Independence. I think it'll be a very good meeting. That's, good. Okay. We still, so that'll be like the Marble Hill piece for, the inspectors, I think.
I can go over it, I have, so we have install security cameras or make other safety upgrades. We have, what was on this page, I pulled it up. This is the walkways and sidewalk to minimize tripping hazards around the Marble Hill houses. And I did see, the boiler repairs and replacements is on here, so these things are on here already. So is there something?
So, the question is, has any of them been done? I mean, just 'cause they're on there doesn't mean they go on
I
again.
think they've been on it for multiple years.
Okay, but, right? We gotta find that out.
So what can you do to make this, go ahead.
On that list, the only thing that has been worked on are the boilers. The work has not been completed, but it has been worked on. The sidewalks are still the same. There's still issues in regards to the walkways. A large portion of the walkways are broken up. The roots have pushed up the sidewalk and caused cracks, especially when you're dealing with coming on and off of the sidewalk, those areas. So none of that has been done.
Okay, so
Do we wanna split this work then, same thing, let's like.
we're gonna be speaking with Marble Hill next month.
Oh, and then, but like, it'd be easier to not just be like, hey, these are the ones we're following up on, and then at this meeting, be prepared with updates.
It's easier for them to tell us
Yes, that's
what the
right.
current needs are, and if they don't mention what's in there, then obviously it's not an issue.
I don't know, I just like, I see the value in the other way, where it's just like, you know, like, we wanna
Well,
just.
Ted can just look at that and he can tell us, 'cause they're all.
Oh, it's mostly,
He lives there.
okay.
He lives
But
there.
are you good with that, like, you know, being able to provide some updates on particularly the Marble Hill ones?
Yeah, I have no problem, but the issue, once again, is the city. Because the management team, from that report and information that you have in front of you, has changed twice since that information was generated. So now there's someone else new now that's there that may not be privy to some of these issues or familiar with the community board and the things that we brought to them. So that's also an issue that you have to look at.
Okay, okay.
So we gotta start again, essentially with these new people.
Ted, did this go to everybody on the board?
You should have it, I can resend it to the.
Okay, Ted, we're gonna make sure you get again, the last year, the 2025 budget request, for Community Board 8. Okay, so you'll have that, and you'll know, I'm sure as soon as you look at it, you'll remember, what you put in.
Right.
And then we will talk to the residents. There may very well be something new that they care about. There may be something they care about more than some things on this list. There may be, that's why you talk to people. They're the ones who are living there, and they can tell us, and we're asking, what do you see as your needs for a capital budget request and expense budget?
I wish there could be an easier way to pull them, right? Like, is there, something that when they come into the building, they can scan and do a poll or something, like, so that, because otherwise we're just, some people are gonna get more airtime than others. Some people might not even be in the right mind space to talk about what's an issue to them because they've been dealing with it all their lives, right? Or it's just like things don't work and they keep it moving because, either it could be fear-based, like, if they ask for something and it's gonna start something new, like, I don't know.
Hey, Julie.
You can always ask the Tenants Association presidents, Tony, I don't know who it is in the Bailey, in Fort Independence rather. You could ask them if they could put something either in their newsletter or they could do like one of those free surveys to ask their tenants feedback. Like put it on a Tenants Association to get feedback from the tenants.
Yes, it would be Tony Edwards and the woman I spoke to, when it came to City of Yes, the Housing Authority piece.
Right.
Her name was Barbara, and I forget her last name.
Right.
Right? We got it, okay, but I have spoken with her in the past, so, her and Tony, and, that can be a little advance notice of come to the, St. Stephen's meeting and, tell us what's going on, especially in the area of capital budget and expense budget requests, okay? Good? Okay. And Sanchez can come to St. Stephen's. We very much appreciate it, as she did.
Right.
Okay, anything else?
Actually make the March meeting entirely the budget priorities, but.
I think yes, but if the councilwoman is willing to come, we're not gonna say don't come.
Oh, that's the Sanchez you were talking about.
Yes, I'm sorry, yeah.
Right, that's why I was like, who? And then it clicked later, yeah. Mhm.
If she can come next month, she can come, whatever.
He's available.
That's
Maybe
it?
for the first item.
He's been in contact with the office, so, anything else?
Can I make a motion to adjourn?
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And it's seconded. And everyone is in agreement, we're going to adjourn? Thank you.
Good night,
Julie, thank you for
Rosemary.
being here. And
Thank you.
Ted,
Good
to
meeting.
see you.
Good meeting. Good.
Okay, thank you.